Immediately after the historic fight that was Forrest Griffin versus Stephan Bonnar, the executive for Spike TV pulled Dana White into the back alley behind the Cox Pavilion where they worked out a TV deal on the spot. Most of the details for this massive deal were written down on a napkin, thus the beginning of a new era for the UFC. At the time, who would have guessed that that sweaty, beer-stained napkin would be a museum-worthy piece in UFC history? Of course, with the immense success of The Ultimate Fighter Season 1, there was 100% going to be a Season 2. The fighters casted for this season were far more experienced than the cast for Season 1 in an attempt to try to avoid another Jason Thacker situation.
Nobody pisses on my bag.
From what I've seen so far, Jason Thacker, the guy who got picked on the most, had more f***ing heart than you guys so far.
But like I said, they tried. The first fighter we are going to talk about is Kerry Schall. Schall already had a full MMA career before even getting onto the show. He had a record of 20-7 with notable losses to Fedor Emelianenko and Big Ben Rothwell. He was known for his massive size and punching power, so he went by the nickname Meat Truck, but I think it's better we just call him Kerry. Things would turn sour immediately for Kerry as he got injured on day one. Unfortunately, it ended up being a torn meniscus, forcing him out of the competition before it even began. The UFC still gave him an opportunity on the undercard for the Ultimate Fighter 2 finale, but he got TKO'd by Keith Jardine and was therefore released. From there, he fought in smaller promotions but retired after losing 5 of his last 6 fights, putting his record at 24-13. Kerry now has his own consulting company where he works as a marketing and logistics consultant, as well as being the chief marketing officer for Guillard's Goetta, which sells food products. The complete opposite of Kerry Schall, who had 27 fights before getting on The Ultimate Fighter, Eli Joslin only had 1.
When I was in the ring for the first time, I looked over at the other guy across the ring like his head was a piñata, and I went over there and started smashing his head till the candy came out. I've been fighting my whole life. Fighting's what I do. I think I'm a modern day gladiator.
Almost every site you can find shows that he knocked out his opponent in 10 seconds, so I guess that was impressive enough for whoever was in charge for casting the fighters for this season. But this proved to be a mistake because he came in way too mentally weak.
I don't know. I just ain't into the camera thing. Yeah, I'm leaving. That's it.
When? Now?
Right now. There's just something from the first minute that I was here, something was pulling me away from here, and I can't explain what it was.
Eli became the first person to quit the show. He took an opportunity from another fighter and quit after just 2 days. After the embarrassing showing on the show, he fought one more time, winning by submission and retiring with a 2-0 record and finishing both of his opponents in the first round. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any leads to where he might be now. If any of you guys have any information, feel free to let me know in the comments below. Kenny Stevens held a record of 6-2 before getting on the show. After the initial 2-day evaluation, Dana White and the 2 coaches got together and decided who was the weakest welterweight. But instead of just eliminating him from the competition like they originally said they would do, they instead gave him a chance to pick someone to fight in order to stay on the show.
Sam Morgan?
The reason I picked Sam is when it was my turn to pick a fighter to fight, Sam wouldn't look at me, and I thought, in my opinion, that he didn't want to fight me.
Kenny, you picked me? You want to dance? Let's dance.
Coaches Rich Franklin and Matt Hughes flipped a coin for who would take which fighter, and Rich Franklin became Kenny Stevens' trainer to help him with weight cutting and preparation for the fight. Kenny had the daunting task of cutting over 20 pounds in just 24 hours.
He's out. No, it's just, you're gonna have to stay in that sauna as much as you hate it. If you don't stay in that sauna, you're not gonna make weight.
Put it down, I'll come in, put it down. All right, put it down, we'll beat it.
What's it doing?
He looks at me and he says, I'm done. And I said, you're done when you make weight? And he says, I'm done. I can't make it. I don't want to do it.
Unfortunately, Kenny broke mentally, he forfeit the fight, and he finds himself on the next flight home. Because of this, Kenny wouldn't get a chance in the UFC, so he stuck to smaller shows where he would only win 2 of his next 8 fights and retire with a record of 8-9. Kenny is still active in the MMA community. He coaches fighters while also running a food truck called Fridays. Melvin Guillard would describe himself as the type of guy who was born to fight. He began his professional career with an impressive 10-0 record before suffering his first defeat, and held a record of 18-4-2 before even getting on The Ultimate Fighter. He was Rich Franklin's 7th pick, and on the show he quickly got on people's nerves.
Yeah, I get down whenever. We get down in the house, I get kicked out of this bitch tonight.
Melvin is always just bah, 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 bah. His bark is bigger than his bite. And Zone's gonna shut him up.
I'll fight anybody, even Matt Hughes. It'll suck for Matt, but I'll just have to take his belt, you know?
Melvin was called out by Josh Burkman for the first fight of the season. One of the most viral moments of this season came when Melvin pulled a prank on Dana White due to multiple people already pulling out of the competition.
And I'm starting to feel like this ain't for me, man. Like, I really just want to go home. Gotcha.
The way that the week had gone, I thought he was serious.
Melvin broke his hand in the beginning of the second round and was ultimately out-wrestled, losing the fight by unanimous decision. But after the show, Melvin would go on to have a very long career with the UFC, spanning nearly 10 years. He would win in 3 of his first 4 fights with the promotion, and all those wins came by knockout before taking on fellow TUF Season 2 alum Joe Stevenson. Melvin was submitted in just 27 seconds, and the embarrassing loss caused him to publicly accuse Joe of using human growth hormones. But the funny thing is, when they tested Melvin's own pre-fight urine sample, he was the one that ended up testing positive for cocaine. Because of this, he was suspended for 8 months and fined $2,100. Immediately after this suspension was lifted, Melvin got back in the octagon but was submitted again in the first round. He went on a 3-fight win streak before getting submitted by Nate Diaz, and then went on a 5-fight win streak which included beating Jeremy Stevens, but then would get submitted twice in a row against Joe Lozon and Jim Miller. Melvin would bounce back, winning his next fight, but then would miss weight and get knocked out by Donald Cerrone. A few fights later, he lost the decision to Michael Johnson and was released from the UFC. But that was far from the end. Outside the UFC, he lost a split decision to Justin Gaethje before signing with Bellator, and this is where he would lose 3 in a row under that promotion. He fought in some bare knuckle fights while also still taking MMA fights in between, and in these MMA fights is where he got knocked out by both Muslim Salikov and Israel Adesanya. The knockout losses just continued to roll in when he was knocked out by Takanori Gomi in MMA and then knocked out by Joe Riggs in bare knuckle. What's interesting is that to this day he is still fighting. He's coming off a submission loss earlier this year and is scheduled for a kickboxing match. His record stands at 32-23-2, and it'll be interesting to see how much longer he plans to fight.
But wait, there's more!
Melvin will also have his fair share of run-ins with the law. In 2018, he was facing 4 felony charges stemming from 3 separate incidents, one being domestic violence against his girlfriend and the other 2 being assaults at a couple bars in Denver, Colorado. For the bar incidents, Melvin was eventually charged with 6 charges and was jailed with a 2-year probation following release. Once released, he was back in court for the domestic violence incident, but he didn't end up doing more time in the hole for that. Melvin is still pretty active on social media and is still signed with the BKFC. Josh Burkman held a record of 13-3 and was Matt Hughes' 3rd pick. Before becoming a fighter, Burkman was a 3-sport star athlete. He was an all-state 3rd baseman in baseball, a captain on the football team, and finished 2nd place in the wrestling state championship. Burkman was good enough to play football at the collegiate level, and in his sophomore season he rushed for nearly 1,500 yards and 13 touchdowns, earning JUCO All-American honors. His performance impressed scouts, and he was offered a D1 scholarship from the University of Utah. Ultimately, he ended up dropping football and instead pursued a career in mixed martial arts. After Team Hughes won the first competition of the season, they got the power to pick the first fight. Josh Burkman chose to call out Melvin Guillard due to him being so outspoken about how he thinks he's the best fighter in the house. Josh would go on to defeat Melvin by decision, but Melvin proved to be a tougher opponent than Josh was expecting, and unfortunately he broke his arm in the fight, and because of it he became the 4th person to be pulled from the competition. He was still given an opportunity in the UFC, and after going 5-2 with the promotion, he would end up losing 3 fights in a row, which caused him to get released. Outside the UFC, he had much more success, going 9-2 in his next 11 fights, and in the process unintentionally being the reason for the downfall of Steve Mazzagatti. But hey, we got this legendary Dana White rant out of it.
If you ever watch Mazzagatti ref a fight, he fucking stands there like this. He's doing his fucking grocery list, thinking about did he TiVo the fucking his favorite show. I don't know what the fuck this guy's doing. Or sometimes he'll go like this and start looking like this when they're not even fucking doing anything. When they're doing shit, he's not in there when he's supposed to be in there. I said it a long time ago. The guy shouldn't even be watching MMA on television, let alone fucking reffing it. And you see Fitch's arms go dead. You see him go limp. Mazzagatti standing in the corner. Pick up some bread, fucking milk.
And eventually he earned a second chance on the big stage in the UFC. Hector Lombard was tasked with welcoming Josh back, and Josh would lose this fight by decision, but luckily for him, Lombard would end up testing positive for banned substances, so the fight was overturned to a no contest. And then Josh would lose 2 more fights before finally getting back in the win column, but then would go on to lose 5 more in a row and get released for the second time. He would have 1 more fight in the LFA and lost again, making it 6 losses in a row before retiring. He officially retired with a record of 28-18. A little fun fact about Josh Burkman is that he once dated UFC ring girl Ariane Celeste. Okay, my boy, I see you. This guy definitely knows what I'm talking about. But anyways, he now coaches at a gym in Utah called The Dojo. Rob McDonald was a nationally ranked wrestler in Ontario, Canada, and before getting on the show, he held a record of 3-0. He was Matt Hughes' 7th pick and would become the first Canadian to actually fight on the show. In episode 3, Rob says he has a torn labrum, which angers Matt Hughes because he just constantly keeps complaining about it. After winning the team challenge and despite the constant complaints, Team Hughes still decides to select Rob as the next fight, and he would take on Brad Imes, who was also struggling with a pair of injuries. Rob started the fight strong, but would end up getting submitted late in the first round, and if there were any other doubts about this guy having a torn labrum, they were very quickly dismissed, because after this fight, his labrum was torn so bad it went down into his bicep, and without a doubt after the show would immediately need surgery. In the UFC, he would get released after going 1-2, being submitted in both of those losses, and outside the UFC, he won 1 fight but then would lose 2 more after. It seemed like he retired after these losses back in 2009, but out of nowhere, more than a decade later, he was given a shot on The Ultimate Fighter Season 30.
My name is Bobby Maximus. I'm 43 years old. I was on The Ultimate Fighter Season 2, but I'm gonna be the oldest competitor ever on The Ultimate Fighter. This could be my last chance, so I'm willing to do anything it takes to go win this fight.
You gotta defend yourself. Defend yourself. Defend yourself. Defend yourself. Defend yourself.
Unfortunately, he didn't get the fairy tale ending he might have wanted, and that was his last fight to date. His fight record sits at 5-4, and since retiring, he works as an online fitness coach. Marcus Davis came from a very troubled past. He was a witness to several severe crimes at a very young age, and getting into fights caused him to get stabbed twice and get shot on more than 1 occasion. He started karate at 8 years old but moved to boxing at 14, where he would take fighting much more seriously. And at 18 years old, he became a professional boxer, compiling a record of 17-1-2 before retiring from boxing after a knockout loss. After retirement, he ran a bar, and this is where he met future UFC champion Tim Sylvia, who was working as the doorman. They both decided to join the same MMA training organization, and Davis would make his professional MMA debut in 2003. After a 3-2 record, which included a title win in a smaller organization, he got the call to join the Ultimate Fighter and was Rich Franklin's 4th pick. Marcus selects Joe Stevenson to be his opponent. This striker versus grappler matchup proved to be a bad decision from the get-go. And Marcus would end up tapping due to ground strikes. After the fight, Marcus contemplates hanging up the gloves and focusing on his family, but the retirement didn't last very long, as immediately after the show aired, he was set to take on Melvin Guillard. He ended up losing to Melvin Guillard due to a cut and was released from the UFC. I don't know if it was him getting released or what, but something lit a fire under him, because outside the UFC, he went on a crazy 5-fight win streak, finishing 4 of those opponents, which earned him a 2nd shot in the UFC, and he took off running. Over the next 2 years, he won 6 fights, finishing 5 of those 6 opponents, which put him on an 11-fight win streak. The crazy streak would come to an end at the hands of Mike Swick, but after that loss, he won 2 more fights in a row before losing to Dan Hardy by decision, and then getting knocked out by Ben Saunders. He was able to get back in the win column in his next fight, but then would be matched up against Nate Diaz. The Nate Diaz fight earned him a Fight of the Night bonus despite being submitted late in the 3rd round. It was very clear that in his fights, Marcus Davis tends to be a very fast starter, which was very evident in his fight against Nate Diaz, and then evident again in his next fight against Jeremy Stephens, where he was well on his way to winning a decision, but ended up getting knocked out in the 3rd round. This loss caused him to be released from the UFC again, but Marcus wasn't done fighting just yet. He won 5 of his next 6 fights before getting signed to Bellator, but after getting submitted in the 1st round, he moved to another promotion where he was knocked out. His next fight was his last, and he was able to leave on a high note, winning by submission and retiring with a record of 23-11. Marcus now takes pride in remaining physically fit, he coaches MMA, and he wrote a book about his upbringing and fight career. Tom Murphy was an All-American wrestler, taking 2nd place in the NCAA D3 National Championships. And when he joined the Ultimate Fighter, he held a 2-0 record, with his wins coming by submission and by knockout. He was Matt Hughes' 6th pick, and after Team Hughes won a challenge, Matt had to select someone for the next fight. The weird thing is that all the heavyweights on Team Hughes were injured, so he wasn't super confident on any of them winning, so he chose the person he thought was the weakest link on their team to allow the better guys more time to recover. Tom Murphy was the one selected, and they chose to fight Rashad Evans since he's a natural 205-pound fighter, making him the smallest heavyweight in the competition. Tom would end up losing by unanimous decision and be the next fighter sent home. In his UFC debut, he would win by TKO, but after a couple canceled bouts, he found himself outside the UFC. This is where he would win 3 more fights and retire in 2010. He retired with an undefeated 6-0 record and a 100% finishing rate. His only loss was that exhibition fight with Rashad Evans, so it doesn't count towards his actual record. Tom is now a businessman and the director of Sweethearts and Heroes, which is a team of people who aim to prevent hopelessness, bullying, and suicide. Jorge Gurgel was one of the more interesting characters of this season. George is a BJJ black belt, and he became an American citizen while he was attending college at Wright State University. While being a student in the morning, he also taught jiu-jitsu during the evening and worked as a waiter at night. Before getting on the show, he held a record of 9-1, with every single one of his fights ending by submission. He was Rich Franklin's 2nd pick, and in episode 2, he re-injured his left knee, which was initially an ACL injury that occurred a month before getting on the show. In episode 4, we learned that George might be a little too competitive for his own good.
You guys want to see how competitive George is? What sound does a chicken make?
Just because Joe dared him to, he shoved a noodle through his nose and pulled it out his mouth.
George. Suck. You gotta suck.
Come on, George.
Oh, almost there. You're almost there. Eat it!
Matt Hughes recognizes the competitive nature and does a good job at using it to get under George's skin.
That's what I thought, Georgie.
No, he wanted to fight. Yeah, George, you went into that thing.
Matt, you better cut it out. He asked me if I was gonna fight, and I said I've been wanting to fight, and Matt actually says there's a difference, George, between somebody that says he wants to fight and somebody that fights. It questions my character, it questions my heart as a fighter.
It makes me so bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously going to have to be me picking you to fight. I mean, it's not going to be you. I mean, that's pretty obvious the way it's going to have to be.
So Matt starts heckling George a little bit and says, you sure aren't going to step in the ring on your own.
Matt knows how to get to me and get me wound up. That's all he needs to do is like poking a Wolverine. I get real upset, I lose my mind, I go crazy.
In the Scarecrow competition, Joe Stevenson goes first, while George waits for his turn to try and beat Joe's score. But by the time Joe finishes, him and his partner are completely spent and get so sore that they couldn't even train properly for the next few days. Rich Franklin saw the toll that this competition took on their bodies and strategically made George forfeit so their guys could stay fresh for upcoming fights. So of course this decision made George very upset.
We'll forfeit. Me and Rich have never forfeit anything in our lives. I do not understand what is going on.
Where's your bag?
Forfeit is for cowards, dude. Well, they better pick me or I'm gonna be pissed. I wanna fight somebody.
Luckily for his sanity, he was selected to fight next.
We knew you weren't gonna pick anybody.
Yeah, I'm scared to fight your teammates. I'm sorry, Matt.
Weigh-ins tomorrow at 4 o'clock. We gotta fight. Good luck, guys.
Matt, thanks a lot for the jokes. All you did was motivate me. I thank you for picking me to fight. And watch me.
But ultimately, I think Matt Hughes' strategy to get under George's skin worked, because in his fight, he would gas out halfway through it, trying to crank on submissions and trying to brawl. The much more active Jason Flue was able to completely take over the fight and pull off one of the biggest upsets of the season.
The entire green team, including myself, couldn't believe that George had lost the fight against Jason. That option never ran through our head.
After the show, George took a year off to fully recover from his injuries, but he would end up losing in his return fight. Despite the loss, the UFC would still keep him around and he would win his next 2 fights. But this high didn't last very long because in his next 4 fights, he ended up losing 3 of those 4 and therefore would be cut from the UFC. He then signed with Strikeforce, and in that promotion, he would go 2-4, ultimately retiring in 2014 on a 3-fight losing streak. George now owns a gym called the JG MMA and Fitness Academy, and just recently he made a ton of appearances on the Usman vs. Buckley Fight Night card. At the time, Dan Christensen held a record of 7-3, which included becoming the WEC Super Heavyweight Champion and had a notable win over Big Ben Rothwell. He was Matt Hughes' 4th pick and was brought in to replace Kerry Schall, who had to leave the competition due to an injury. Dan was tasked with having to fight Seth Petruzelli, who was a friend of his. So because they were friends, this caused him to fight extremely timid and ultimately lose it by decision. After the show, he wouldn't fight again for nearly a year, but when he finally got his opportunity in the UFC, he took full advantage, winning by submission in his debut. But then after that, he would lose by decision to Frank Mir and subsequently was released from the UFC. After losing his next 2 fights, he would then go on a crazy 8-fight winning streak and finishing all of those 8 opponents until he ended up losing another decision, and then would go on a 4-fight winning streak, also finishing all of those opponents before retiring with a record of 20-7. Fun fact about his career is that all 20 of his wins came by stoppage, and every fight that went to the scorecards he ended up losing. After retirement, he got married and moved to his wife's home state of Indiana, where it's unclear what he might be doing for work now. My only guess would be that he might have went back to working as an engineer, or maybe he coaches jiu-jitsu at a local gym since most of his wins came by submission. Anthony Torres held a 3-0 record when he joined the Ultimate Fighter and was Rich Franklin's 6th pick. He was pinned against Luke Cummo, which by the way is by far the weirdest guy in the house, but we will get to that a little bit more later. Anthony would end up losing by unanimous decision, and after the show he was not immediately signed to the UFC, so he fought in a smaller promotion where he would get a win by 1st round knockout and finally be signed to the UFC. In his promotional debut, he submitted Pat Healy in the 1st round, but then would have another layoff for over a year until he was eventually knocked out in the 1st round and was released. Outside the UFC, he lost his next 2 fights, making it 3 losses in a row, causing him to retire with a record of 5-3. During his fight career, he worked as a correctional officer, and through the years has worked his way up to becoming the commissioner of the Department of Corrections. Mike Whitehead was a high school state champion and 3-time All-American wrestler. At the time, Mike was 9-4 and was Matt Hughes' 2nd pick. After several lackluster performances from members of Team Hughes, Mike says that he will not hold back when it's his turn to fight.
I just know that, when I go out there and fight, they're going to get everything from me. I'm not going to be holding anything back.
He called out Rashad Evans, and come fight day, well, I'll let you see for yourselves.
He came out and tried to wrestle a wrestler. I know he has better stand-up than Rashad. And Rashad was actually beating him to the punch, hitting him at will.
When Mike couldn't get him down to the ground, he couldn't keep him down, he lost all confidence, and he just lost the will to fight out there.
Mike just choked. He choked. There's 10 seconds left of the fight, and he just quits. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen.
Don't worry, you only got seconds left. Hey, yeah, Mike, go ahead and lean up against the fence and let the time run out.
I'd rather have somebody go out there and try as hard as they can and get knocked out than lose that way. Go out, try it. Go out, swing it. But don't just give up like that.
Mind you, this whole time this guy was a huge favorite to win this entire competition. After this embarrassing performance on the show, he would still be given a chance in the UFC, but was cut immediately after losing to Keith Jardine. But outside the UFC, he was able to have immense success, going on a 13-fight win streak before suffering his next defeat by decision. He eventually signed with Strikeforce and was able to beat the late great Kevin Randleman, rest in peace. And in his last 5 fights, he would go 3-2 before officially retiring in 2015 with a record of 27-8. However, in 2011 and in 2015, there was a large gap where he did not fight at all. So I looked into it, and it turns out he was in prison for sexually assaulting 2 women. On top of the prison sentence, he was also forced to pay $2,400 in restitution and was forced to register as a sex offender. The crazy thing is that when Mike was under investigation by Las Vegas police for the sexual assault allegations, the police turned up at his house during this investigation, and this is where they discovered over $500,000 worth of marijuana plants. But what's interesting is that he wasn't charged at all for the marijuana, and he now works as a mortgage broker in Oregon. Sammy Morgan was another fighter coming into the Ultimate Fighter house with a background in wrestling. Upon entering the house, he was coming off a knockout win over Dwayne Ludwig. He came in with a record of 16-6 and was Matt Hughes' 5th pick. He never got called out in the quarterfinal round, so he was able to slide straight through to the semifinals, where he was matched up against Luke Cummo. It was a very tough back and forth fight until Sammy was brutally knocked out with a knee to the head.
Sam's trying a couple nifty guard passes where he's jumping over Luke's legs. Luke keeps him from pretty much doing anything real effective.
Sam had realized he was having a hard time getting him down to the ground, so Sam just came out swinging. Out of nowhere, Luke catches him and knocks him dead.
After the show, Sammy was slammed unconscious by Josh Burkman and therefore released from the UFC. He then went on a 2-fight win streak and was given a second chance in the UFC, but he immediately lost and was cut again. Fun fact about his second fight in the UFC is that Sam was actually knocked down so many times that one judge scored the fight 30-23, making it the only scorecard to have that bad of a deficit in UFC history. Outside the UFC, he won one more fight before going on a 4-fight losing streak, which caused him to retire with a record of 19-12. One of the most recognizable names from this season goes to Keith Jardine. Jardine competed in Greco-Roman wrestling and played football in college. After earning a degree in human performance and sports, he worked as a personal trainer, a firefighter, a football coach, a miner, and a bounty hunter, all before starting his MMA career. On the side, he also played a little bit of rugby and competed in wrestling tournaments before moving to Albuquerque, New Mexico, where he would train under Greg Jackson. Jardine was entering the Ultimate Fighter house with a record of 9-1-1 and was the very first person picked to a team. Nobody called him out in the quarterfinal round, so he didn't fight until the semifinals, and this is where he was matched up against Rashad Evans, who had already fought twice in the competition. It was a back and forth fight, but he would lose by decision and suffer a massive cut in the process. But after the show, he had a pretty good career in the UFC. He won his first 2 fights before losing to Stephan Bonner, rest in peace, and then he won 2 more fights, which included defeating Forrest Griffin before he would lose again to Houston Alexander. He ended up beating Chuck Liddell before he lost to Vanderlei Silva, and then would win 1 more fight before going on a 4-fight losing streak, losing to guys like Rampage Jackson, Thiago Silva, Ryan Bader, and Matt Hamill. After his 4th loss in a row, he was released from the UFC, and after going 2-1 in some smaller shows, he was then signed to Strikeforce, where he ended up getting a draw with Gegard Mousasi, got knocked out by Luke Rockhold, and lost to Roger Gracie, which ended up being his last fight to date. In 2013, he teased a comeback when in an interview he said he was only semi-retired, but Keith would never end up fighting again, officially retiring with a record of 17-11-2. Over the years, Jardine has developed a new passion for acting and directing. He has made appearances in several different films, and now he even writes and directs his own. You can check out his most recent project called Kill Me Again. You can rent it wherever you get your movies. Jason Von Flue came into the Ultimate Fighter house with a record of 10-4-1. Jason was brought in as a replacement for Josh Burkman due to Josh having to leave the competition with a broken arm, and immediately Jason felt like there was a target on his back for being the new guy. Plus, let's be real, Matt Hughes didn't have all that much faith in him. In his first fight, he would end up defeating Jorge Gurgel, who was a big favorite to win the entire show. This was a massive upset, but the odd thing is that you'd think Matt Hughes would be elated that a late replacement took out the other team's #1 welterweight, but Matt Hughes couldn't care less.
After Jason's fight, Matt didn't seem like the same person after, one of the blue team wins. It seemed like he didn't even care.
I could have lost Jason,
and not been too worried about it.
You know, I came in late in this competition, and Team Hughes didn't really accept me right off the bat. But after I beat George, I thought for sure I'd gain some respect.
To add insult to injury, the teams were uneven, so Team Hughes was forced to send a welterweight over to Team Franklin, and without hesitation, Matt Hughes made his choice.
Jason?
Yes, sir. Matt got rid of the weakest link by sending me over to Team Franklin. You. 15 minutes worth of footage that says I whooped the best guy on Team Franklin's ass. Right there.
I mean, he has every right to be pissed off the way I see it. This type of thing easily made me want to root for him to win the entire show, but it seemed like everything was against him because in episode 10, while training, he sustained a cut that was so deep you could see his skull. Despite the injury, Jason was cleared to fight, but the Cinderella story would not happen as he would lose out the competition in the semifinals. His career in the UFC was also not that eventful. He went 1-2 before being released from the promotion. However, in his first and only win in the UFC, Jason was able to become immortalized when he invented a choke that has since been called the Von Flue choke. When a fighter utilizes the guillotine, they must pull back on their upper body while also pulling away on their lower body to help with the leverage on the choke. But when you just try to choke with your arms and you don't create that separation, the person on top can actually forcibly press down with their shoulder and choke you instead. It's a submission you don't see very often at a high level because it's easily avoidable if the guillotine is performed with the proper technique, or you can literally just let go of the guillotine to stop the Von Flue choke. But anyways, back to Jason Von Flue. After his release from the UFC, he didn't see much success. He went 3-6 in several different promotions, and in all 6 of those losses, he got stopped. His last fight was in 2009, but he attempted to make a comeback in 2014, but the bout was canceled, so Jason officially retired with a record of 14-12-1. Now Jason spends his days training in jiu-jitsu and karate while teaching others through private lessons and occasional seminars. Seth Petruzelli started karate at 7 years old, and in high school he wrestled, played football, and ran track. He was offered a scholarship to play football and wrestle in college, but he turned it down to pursue a professional career in MMA straight out of high school. This is where he developed his kickboxing skills and racked up several knockouts in his 7-2 record. He had knocked out 5 of his last 6 opponents when he got the call for the Ultimate Fighter. He was Rich Franklin's 3rd pick and initially wasn't supposed to fight when he did. Rich Franklin and the team agreed that Jardine would fight Mike Whitehead next, but in the last minute they switched the matchup. So Seth ended up having to fight his friend Dan Christensen and was able to coast to a decision win. He wanted to fight Brad Imes next in the semifinals because he said that he likes fighting much bigger guys, but this would come back to bite him as he would lose to Brad Imes by split decision. After losing in his UFC debut, Seth was also released from the UFC. But after scoring a knockout in his next fight, he was given a second chance in the UFC, but got submitted and was immediately released again. It seemed like Seth was going to be just another forgotten fighter that once got a chance to fight on the big stage, but shortly after this second release, Seth would be involved in one of the most viral and most talked about moments in MMA history. A moment where he single-handedly destroyed an entire fight organization in just 14 seconds. The Elite XC was a new fight organization that took MMA by storm. They signed some of the biggest names and put together a stacked card that brought in over 4.5 million viewers. This card included fights like Andrei Arlovsky versus Roy Nelson, Jake Shields versus Paul Daly. The super popular Gina Carano was also going to fight on this card, and at the helm was Kimbo Slice versus Ken Shamrock. Maybe not the most talented fighters in the world, but definitely a couple of the most famous. Ken Shamrock would end up having to pull out due to an injury on the day of the fight, and in a scramble for a replacement just hours before the event, Seth Petruzelli, who was scheduled to fight on the undercard, was bumped up and now part of the main attraction. Or at least he was a sacrificial lamb for the real main attraction. This matchup was basically used to make Kimbo Slice the cash cow of the Elite XC. He was supposed to be the superstar that would push this promotion to all new heights. There's no way the killer street fighter Kimbo Slice would lose to a guy who was just cut from the UFC, was coming in on very short notice, and had stupid pink hair, right?
And it's about to get serious. Slice quickly across. Slice goes down. Slice in trouble. Oh my goodness. Slice gets pounded out and they stop it. The most incredible victory in the history of mixed martial arts. Seth Petruzelli.
All it took was 14 seconds and Elite XC's Kingpin was destroyed in his own backyard. At the time, it was one of the most shocking knockouts in MMA history, but the even more shocking events were soon to follow. Shortly after the event, Seth claimed that he was asked by promoters to not take Cummo to the ground, as they knew Cummo's best shot at winning was going to be on the feet. If Seth stayed standing, they would pay him extra money. So immediately an investigation was opened on the Elite XC. However, due to insufficient evidence, the case was closed before it even began. But we got this iconic Dana White moment.
That's fucking illegal.
Elite XC put all their eggs into one basket, and after the insanely viral knockout, networks didn't want to take a chance on the promotion, so they collapsed shortly after. Seth simultaneously destroyed this organization and also put his name on the map, and after 2 more wins in other organizations, he was given a 3rd opportunity in the UFC. But unfortunately, he would lose 2 fights in a row and was cut for the 3rd and final time. He then signed with Bellator, where he would win in his promotional debut, but would lose twice in a row again, causing him to retire with a finishing record of 14-8. Seth now owns 2 gyms in Orlando, Florida, and appears to be really enjoying fatherhood. Every season, there is at least one person who seems, to put it nicely, not normal. For this season, Luke Cummo was that guy. For example, Cummo endorsed and partook in urine therapy, which includes using your urine for medicinal or cosmetic purposes. AKA, he was drinking his own piss and rubbing it on his skin. And for some reason, I feel obligated to say this, but no scientific evidence exists that supports any beneficial health claims from urine therapy. Please do not, and I repeat, do not drink your pee or use it like P. Diddy uses baby oil. But according to Luke Cummo, he felt as though urine therapy gave him an advantage over the competition, which actually, now that I think about it, maybe he's onto something. Who the hell would want to wrestle with this guy? Moving on now, he entered the Ultimate Fighter house with a 3-2 record, was coming off a loss to Josh Koscheck, and was the very last person picked to a team. And if you thought the weirdness would end there, we've but only scratched the surface, my friend.
We got Luke in our room, I don't know. Definitely a strange bird.
When I point my head to the north when I'm sleeping, I'm putting my own chi in sync with the flow of the chi of the earth. I believe that by eating the way I do, it raises my vitality, which is a result of raising your chi.
Last night, I was sleeping with one eye open, man.
The force is strong with this one.
Flue. Compass in one hand, his lightsaber in the other. Point to the north, my bet needs to.
He's the CC's Diego. Luke is the funniest character I have ever met. Luke has become the favorite guy in the house. We call him the Jedi, Luke Skywalker.
He's still weird, though. He's still very weird.
Eating this pizza is like if I just had sex with a fat prostitute.
Luke would beat Anthony Torres by decision in his first fight, and in his second fight is where he sent a message, being the very last person picked to a team and now heading into the finale where he would face Joe Stevenson. The finale took place on the undercard of Diego Sanchez versus Nick Diaz, and Luke would end up losing the fight by decision. He would fight 6 more times in the UFC, winning 3 of the 6, but was eventually cut after losing 2 fights in a row. He subsequently retired due to the release, calling it a career with a record of 6-6. To this day, Luke still trains as well as being a coach. On social media, he still posts about health advice and just random everyday stuff in the life of Luke Cummo. Joe Stevenson trained in wrestling, judo, and jiu-jitsu at a very young age. He started his pro MMA career in 1999, and over the next 6 years would amass a record of 23-6 before getting on the Ultimate Fighter. He was a highly experienced veteran of the game with several title fights under his belt, so it made sense that he would be Matt Hughes' first pick. In episode 4, Joe started annoying some of the guys in the house after having a few too many drinks.
Joe, he's just annoying. He's been sort of slacking off. He's been drinking a little bit.
Blue team, go! Oh, it's cold. Oh, it's really cold.
Joe is always on the go, 24 hours out of the day, every day. It kind of gets old.
In his first fight, he made Marcus tap due to elbows, and in the semifinals, he made Jason Von Flue tap from an armbar. He would go on to beat Luke Cummo in the finale by decision and become the Ultimate Fighter Season 2 welterweight winner. And in the UFC, he was able to gather up a pretty decent resume. He fought guys like BJ Penn, Kenny Florian, Diego Sanchez, and he even has a win over Nate Diaz. But he was eventually released from the UFC following a 4-fight losing streak. He ended up losing his next fight outside of the UFC before taking a break for 3 years, and then would end up losing again in his return fight, making it 6 losses in a row. After that, things would start to turn around after winning 2 fights in a row, which included winning a title in a smaller organization. So he ended up getting the call to join the Ultimate Fighter Season 25. On the show, he had 2 fights but lost both of them, and the 18-second knockout loss to Haider Hassan was the catalyst that pushed him into retirement, finishing his career with a record of 33-16. Throughout his career, he had struggles with alcoholism, but he claims to have remained sober since 2014. He is now a jiu-jitsu coach and occasionally does seminars. After graduating high school, Brad Imes was an average 5'9", 165 pounds, but 2 years later, he skyrocketed to 6'7", 290 pounds. Because of this, he decided to try out for the football team as a walk-on for the University of Missouri and would later earn a scholarship as an offensive lineman. After college, he played football in the Arena Football League and coached at TCU. After moving to California and getting laid off from his general manager job, he then set his sights on pursuing an MMA career. He had only been training for 9 months and was 3-0 when he got the chance to join the Ultimate Fighter. Since he was so new to the game, he was the last heavyweight pick to a team, and for his first fight on the show, he took on McDonald and won by submission in the first round. He was then sent over to Team Hughes in the reshuffling and would beat Seth Petruzelli in the semifinals. I thought it was interesting how Cummo was the last welterweight picked and Brad Imes was the last heavyweight picked, and they both ended up making it to the finale. Brad would end up losing in the finale by split decision, and after that, in the UFC, he was submitted, which got him released from the promotion. After 3 straight wins, he was re-signed to the UFC, but immediately lost a decision and was released again. In smaller organizations, he went on a 5-fight win streak before losing again, and in his last 5 fights, he would only win 2 of them before retiring with a record of 13-7. He decided to retire due to concerns for the health of his brain after several years of football and MMA. After retirement, Brad started working in construction and now works as an area manager for a company called Coventry Homes. It also seems like he still trains in jiu-jitsu from time to time. The last fighter, and by far the most recognizable from this season, is Rashad Evans. Rashad was a very experienced high-level wrestler. He became a national champion in high school and moved on to D1 wrestling, where he competed for Michigan State. His most notable win from his college wrestling career came when he was matched up against 3-time national champion Greg Jones. To put this into perspective, Greg Jones finished his college career with a record of 128 wins to just 4 losses, and one of those 4 losses was against Rashad Evans. But after this massive upset in Rashad's next match, he would end up losing and falling just short of All-American status, finishing his wrestling career with a record of 48-34. After college, he set his sights on MMA. He fought 5 times in 3 months and won all 5 fights, holding a record of 5-0 and finding himself in the Ultimate Fighter competition. Rashad beat Tom Murphy by unanimous decision, but his antics during the fight would anger Matt Hughes and Mike Whitehead.
Rashad standing up, he was kind of shaking his head in front of Tom. He was being an idiot.
Rashad, to be honest, I'm going to tell my guys never to act like that in the octagon. I must use you as an example of what not to do.
Rashad pulled some shenanigans during the fight that pissed me off.
Things would come full circle when Rashad would end up fighting Mike next and beat him by decision to head in the semifinals. And things would get even funnier when in the semifinals, Rashad would be matched up against fellow teammate Keith Jardine. So Dana White decided to flip a coin to decide which coach should train and corner which fighter.
Tails. Keith, Rich will be your corner. Rashad, Matt will be your corner.
The odds were already stacked against Rashad. He had already fought twice, was dealing with a hand injury from his last fight, is a natural 205-pound fighter, and now would have to be cornered by a guy he was beefing with just days prior. All while Keith Jardine is a natural heavyweight, is coming into this fight completely fresh, and is a favorite to win the entire competition. Despite all the disadvantages, Rashad would end up pulling off the upset yet again, and after the fight would make amends with Matt Hughes. In the finale, Rashad would beat Brad Imes and become the Ultimate Fighter Season 2 heavyweight winner. Immediately after the show, Rashad dropped back back down to his natural weight class at 205 pounds, and he would go on an insane run, going on a 5-fight win streak in a stacked light heavyweight division before getting his big breakout performance against Chuck Liddell, earning him a title shot against Forrest Griffin. Rashad became the light heavyweight champion of the world, but just as I said a second ago, this division was loaded, so his title reign wouldn't last very long.
Oh, another shot. He's getting teed off on. He's down. He's out. It's all over.
And unfortunately for Rashad, the KO made him the face of one of the most iconic memes in MMA. He bounced back and beat Thiago Silva, and then be given an opportunity to coach the Ultimate Fighter Season 10. This season turned out to be one of the most popular seasons in TUF history, coaching opposite of bitter rival Rampage Jackson. After the show, Rashad defeated Rampage, knocked out Tito Ortiz, and beat Phil Davis, earning him another shot at the title against the young, super talented John Jones. He would lose that fight by decision, and in his next 8 fights, he would only end up winning 2 and decided to retire after getting knocked out by Anthony Smith, making it 5 losses in a row. In 2019, he was inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. In 2022, he came out of retirement and fought in Khabib's Eagle FC, where he was able to officially retire in the win column. At one point, it seemed like he was going to unretire again when the GFL announced that they signed Rashad, but Rashad came out and stated that he was added to their roster without his consent, and eventually all GFL events were cancelled indefinitely anyways. But Rashad might not actually be done fighting just yet. He was set to fight Rampage Jackson in a boxing match, but the fight card ended up getting cancelled, so it'll be interesting to see if he does actually end up fighting again, whether it's in MMA or in boxing. But in the meantime, he still coaches fighters while also training and staying in shape himself, as well as being an analyst for the UFC. And if you were wondering, immediately after the show, Matt Hughes would go on to successfully defend his title by submitting Joe Riggs, and Rich Franklin would also successfully defend his title after KOing Nate Quarry.